May I have your attention, please? May I have your attention, please? Shabbat Shalom, everyone. My name is Feature Priest Shimon Hawkins, and I'd like to serve forever as a police starting very soon. It's a privilege and honor to present to you the feature priest and priestess now entering the sanctuary. It's now my privilege and honor to present to you our first speaker, feature priest Barzillai Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, friend. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Today I'm going to be speaking about Yahweh's feast. Now Yahweh has made his feast days holy days. Please turn with me over to Leviticus 23, 1 through 2. Leviticus 23, 1 through 2, it's on page 101. And it says, And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, concerning the feast of Yahweh, which you shall proclaim to be holy convocations. These are my feasts. Now, if you continue reading there in chapter 23, you will see the feast Yahweh commands his people to keep every year. We see the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the Feast of Pentecost, the Feast of Trumpets, and the Day of Atonement, which is a day to feast on Yahweh's word, not food. Next is the Feast of Tabernacles, and the last great day. Yahweh says his eyes and his heart will be there at his appointed feast. If you could turn over to 1 Kings 9 verse 3. 1 Kings 9 verse 3. It's found on page 284. 1 Kings 9 verse 3. And it says, it's verse 3, and it says, Yahweh said to him, I heard the prayer and the supplication that you have made before me. I have sanctified the consecrated the house you have built, established my name there forever. And my eyes and my heart will be there perpetually. At the required seasons, Yahweh's ordained weekly Sabbath and feast day. Now in closing, Yahweh has made his feast days for his family to come before his presence and rejoice with him in unity as one body, and to escape the great tribulation that's soon to come. So start preparing now. Yahweh's great feast of Passover and unleavened bread is only a few weeks away. You are invited to come rejoice with Yahweh's chosen branch, Yisrayl Hawkins. And with that, I'll turn it over to the next speaker.
Shabbat Shalom once again. At this time, we have the great honor to hear from the great future priest, Deacon Tawakia Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Before I get started today, I just want to encourage you. Satan sets traps for each and every one of us. Satan sets traps for the people that are trying to become like Yahweh, become perfect teachers of Yahweh's laws. So we have to constantly be on guard. Today I'm going to be talking about the grass is not greener on the other side. Because, people are constantly saying The grass is greener. It looks greener on the other side of the fence. Well, I'm here to tell you it's not. Okay? Satan tries to make the world look like, yeah, it's great. It's great out there. You know, you got all these songs that you can listen to, all these movies. It's wonderful. You get rich. You can have all these cars. You can have this great house. But that's what it's made out to look like in Hollywood. But what does the world actually have to offer? Well, I have 3 headlines here. Palestinian fisherman shot dead by Israeli Navy. 2 blasts at northeastern Nigeria market. Officials say gunmen kidnapped 31 suspected criminals in Iraq. So death, sorrow, misery, pain, that's what the world has to offer. Okay, so don't ever think that the world has something better than what the house of Yahweh has to offer. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But Satan tries to make the world look like it's great. If you can be turning over to Genesis chapter 3, and we're going to start out in verse 2. It tries to make it look desirable, that it's great, but she did this in the beginning with Eve. This is on page 2, Genesis chapter 3 and verse 2. It says, "And the woman said to the serpent, We may eat of the fruit of the tree of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, Yahweh has said, You shall not eat it, nor shall you touch it, or you will die." So notice that, you will die. "And the serpent said to the woman, You will not surely die." So there's a little bit of deception there. "You will not surely die. For he knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes will be open, and you will be as God, knowing righteousness and evil." So a little bit of righteousness, but a whole lot of evil. If we look at verse 6, it says, "So that when the woman saw that the tree was desirable for food, that is pleasant to the eyes," so it's desirable, it looked great. It looked like it was something that was really exciting. "A tree desirable to make one wise in their own understanding, she took of its fruit and ate. She also gave to her husband with her, and he ate." So that was deception, deceiving them into making a wrong choice, as we talked about in the peaceful solution. So constantly be on guard, and that's what I'm going to be really talking and stressing today, is being on guard for no matter what comes our way. The truth is plain to see. Salvation is only offered here at Yahweh's house. There's no other church, synagogue, assembly, no other place on earth is salvation offered. Only here at Yahweh's house. True salvation is only offered here at Yahweh's house. They may say they have salvation, but like I said, it's not true salvation. A couple of weeks ago during one of the law classes, the Great Khan was reading out of the book of Yisrayl. I believe it was a 13-part 1. And Pastor said, Don't ever think that you are at the house of Yahweh by accident. You are in the plan of Yahweh. Don't ever doubt Yahweh. And you know, those really stuck with me. Don't ever think that you are at the house of Yahweh by accident. You're in the plan of Yahweh. There was a reason for you to come here. There was a reason for you to be called out to the house of Yahweh. Don't ever doubt Yahweh. Everything Yahweh does, there's a purpose behind it. And that's one thing that we need to keep in mind. Praise Yahweh. If someone tries to pull you out of the house of Yahweh, whether it's subtle like we saw in Genesis, or whether it's something that is really blatant, we have to tell them no. Tell them no and walk away. That's it. And don't let them try to change your mind into, well, maybe just tonight. I'll go out tonight. No, tell them no, I've got to become a teacher of righteousness. I've got to study. I've got to get up on these books. I'm behind on the prophetic words and newsletters. You got all this information to study, so why go out that? Why go out? Why go do these things whenever you have knowledge that can set you on the right track? Like I said in the beginning, Satan sets traps for the people of Yahweh's house. And Yahshua told us in Matthew chapter 24, if you can be turning over to Matthew chapter 24. Matthew chapter 24, and it's on page 752. If we look at verse 4, it says, Yahshua answered and said to them, Be on guard so that no man deceives you. Be on guard so that no man deceives you. Because with all the deception that's going around in the world today, there's a lot of it, we have to constantly be on guard. And Yahshua gave us several examples of being on guard no matter what the circumstances are. One particular example is in Matthew chapter 4. If everyone could turn over to Matthew chapter 4. Matthew chapter 4, and we're going to start out in verse 1. It's on page 730. It says, "Then Yahshua was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. And when he had fasted for 40 days and 40 nights, afterward he was hungry." So, if you've ever done a fast, you know after fasting for 40 days, you start to get weak and you're really hungry. So, this would be a time whenever Yahshua let his guard down, right? No, Yahshua never let his guard down. If we look at verse 3, it says, "So when the tempter came to him, she said, 'If you are the Son of Yahweh, command these stones to be turned to bread.'" You know, he had just got done fasting for 40 days and 40 nights. So, you know, that may have been something that he may have wanted. But notice what he told her. In verse 4, "But he answered and said, 'It is written, man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of Yahweh.'" And notice every answer that Yahshua gives her. He doesn't turn his back on Yahweh. He doesn't say, "Okay, yes, I'll do it." No, he tells her the laws. Tells her the laws of Yahweh and that he's going to keep them. If we look at verse 5, it says, "Then the devil took him up to the holy city and set him on a pinnacle of the sacred precincts of the house of Yahweh and said to him, 'If you are the Son of Yahweh, throw yourself down, for it is written, for he will give his malachim charge concerning you to keep you in all your ways. They will bear you up in their hands if you should strike your foot against the stone.'" And notice what Yahshua said to her. Yahshua said to her, "It is written, you must not test Yahweh your Father." So there's a law there. And then if we look at verse 8, it says, "Again the devil took him up into an exceedingly high mountain, and showed him all the kingdoms of the world, and the magnificence of them, and said to them, 'I will give you all of these things if you fall down and worship me.'" So he could have had this power over all these people. He could have had all this money. He could have had all the authority he wanted. But what did he say to her? If we look at verse 10, "Then Yahshua said to her, 'You get away from me, Satan, for it is written, Yahweh your Father you must reverence, and him only you must serve.'" And there's no doubting that. Yahweh is the only one we should be serving, not Satan. If we let Satan into our lives at all, just a little bit, whether it be by watching a commercial that may put negative thoughts into our mind, we have to get it out. Get it out of our mind, because it'll pull us right out of the house of Yahweh if we allow her to consume us. So you notice his responses. We need to have these same responses in our day-to-day lives. And if someone does try to say something to you about leaving the work of Yahweh or going and doing something, be turning over to Yahshua chapter 24 and verse 15. We need to be telling them this. It's on page 198. Be telling them what it says in Yahshua 24 verse 15. It says on page 198, "But if it seems evil to you to serve Yahweh, then choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether the gods, Elohim, your fathers served on the other side of the river, or the gods Elohim of the Amorites in the land which you now live. But as for me and my house, we will serve Yahweh." And that's what we have to say. We will serve Yahweh no matter what. Yahweh our Father, we must serve, and him only, no one else. And we have to say this constantly. If negative thoughts come into our mind, say this. We will serve Yahweh. What reason do we have to leave the house of Yahweh? Think about that. What reason do we have to leave the house of Yahweh? And you have the cleanest physical food. You have the knowledge coming from the one sent, that you don't have to worry about there being deception, because it's some of the purest knowledge that you're going to get in the world. You have an abundance of it as well. You don't have to worry about ever having to sit down, because you're constantly going to have a job. You're constantly going to be put to work. The world doesn't have any of this to offer. As I read to you, the 3 headlines. There's death, misery, and sorrow. That's what they have to offer. So, in closing, I'd just like to encourage, get involved in the work more and more. And this morning, with the classes this morning, with the proofreading, they had these. Yahweh has invited you to become his perfect proofreader. So next week at 8 o'clock, starts early, so be there so you can become a perfect proofreader. Because there's a lot of, the message is spreading, so we need help proofreading the book. So be there. And with that, if y'all please stand. I have the great honor and privilege to turn it over to the great Khan Ilya.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may all be seated. Looking in the news again, once again, seeing all of the snow dropped on the East Coast and, of course, setting records. Well, they're saying in California they didn't get enough snow, and that makes up for the water, and that's what they were hoping would help with this drought. But now they have no snow melt in California. They're not expecting any rain. So they're saying expect all food prices to go higher. All food prices are going up. Washington, D.C. recently legalized marijuana, and now Congress is wanting to arrest the mayor in Washington, D.C. because of it. Also, there's going to be some footage showing riots taking place in Rome. Down in Fort Hood, there was another shooting, but this shooting did not take place on base, so it didn't get as much news as the shootings that have taken place on base. But another soldier killed 2 people, left 1 critical, and also shot himself. And then a homeless man in Los Angeles was shot to death, and it was caught on tape. Also, a van. Remember Pastor saying you can be sitting in your home and your life be taken. A man in Virginia sitting at his dining room table, and a van comes through the house, through the side of the house, and kills him instantly. And then I want everyone to pay close attention to a new drug. It's not really a new drug, but they're calling it the new drug. It is the most deadliest drug you could come into contact with. The makers of these drugs, actually the average lifespan is 37 years. It's very addictive, and it will leave you with a debilitating disease that will kill you. Pay close attention. Remember 1 Yochanan chapter 1 and verses 15 through 17 with this new drug. You won't escape it if you allow your mind to be tortured by it. Also, Duck Dynasty star Phil Robertson speaking out again against STDs. The EU's claiming to put more sanctions on Russia. Russia's saying this will be war if they continue to do so. NATO's now mentioning ISIS, saying they're going to have to deal with ISIS. Then you have a teacher commit suicide, and the body was found by the students hanging in the classroom in California. Putin actually says he wants no part of this world order taking place. Now, there's more proof showing that this world order, that's the resurrection of this Roman Empire, the reinstatement of this Roman Empire. And Putin is saying they don't want war with anyone, but they want no part of this world order. Well, that's not going to be an option. They're going to try to shove it down the throats of everyone and remove those who don't accept it. And then, of course, an ambassador in South Korea, a U.S. ambassador, was attacked, showing once again protection only comes from Yahweh's house. He was literally sliced in the face. And then at the end, it shows the United States, the largest industrial export the United States has is weaponry. And, of course, if you're running a business and you're selling weapons, what do you need? You need war, continual war. Remember, 1 Yada, chapter 1 and verse 11, the whole world has gone the way of Cain, and that's this endless war that's taking place. So pay attention, look closely for all of those things. If we can go ahead and play the news.
Pay close attention. The news you are about to see is fulfilling Bible prophecy.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you the news as it relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yisrayl Hawkins. Well, today in the news, we have a number of stories for you, all showing Bible prophecy being fulfilled, including the slightly increasing oil prices. We have a deadly new drug that they're saying is one of the most addictive ever.
Interesting.
We have the ongoing Ukraine issue and President Putin's comments on that, and also a suicide, but this time from someone you would not normally expect, and also an attack on a U.S. ambassador. And that's just to name a few of the stories we're covering with you today. Well, first we're going to look at the continued California drought and the effect it is already having and will be having on our food supply. As California's ongoing drought conditions worsen, it is changing food prices and availability across the country. Now, due to a lack of snow this winter, there will be obviously less snow melt, which means less water runoff into the Sacramento River and beyond.
Well, Corey Dietz, a local grower near Davis, brings his crops to the farmers market in Davis to sell twice a week. But with less water to work with, farmers have already been making changes. Mr. Dietz said consumers are going to have to change what they expect fruits and vegetables to look like. We've been kind of raised to believe that broccoli, has normally like a huge head, and that if you see something smaller, well, that's bad. And he said it's not bad. This is just something that uses a little bit less water.
Well, some crops requiring intensive watering may be in low supply this summer, and consumers are already expecting to pay more for those that make it to the market. Now, one market shopper said it definitely increases the prices because, and this is her words, Katan, there's less food to go around. Ooh. And the cost for farmers is going up, so they're having to spend more to make the food. Now, Richard Howitt, a professor of agricultural economics at UC Davis, reminded us that California provides 50% of the fruit, nuts, and vegetables, so the cost of what they're saying is a healthy diet is also going to go up.
Wow, that's bad. Well, Howitt's research reveals a loss of $2.2 billion in jobs for truck drivers and farm workers. Many of those who worked in the fields traveled to Sacramento to urge the state Water Resource Control Board to release more water. And a certain individual, Miguel Perez, a Central Valley farm worker, had this to say: "The water's what we need because we work in the fields, and that's our job. If there's no water, then there's no agriculture, and there's no work for us." Oh. So we see that number of joblessness continuing to rise if this doesn't change soon.
Well, the nation's capital recently relaxed its marijuana laws, but the change has led to a battle between City Hall and Congress. Now, one that has D.C.'s own mayor facing a warning that she could end up behind bars. Now, D.C. residents 21 years and older can now legally possess up to 2 ounces of pot, roughly a sandwich bag's worth. Now, they say that's for the personal use, and they can still grow, or they can grow up to 6 plants at home, but not outside, and you can't smoke in public.
Wow. Well, unlike Alaska, Colorado, and Washington, states where marijuana use is legal, the District of Columbia is not a state and answers to Congress, which tried to block the plan after D.C. voters overwhelmingly approved it last fall. 2 House Republicans are warning the district to reconsider, calling it a knowing and willful violation of the law. Even threatening Washington's mayor could get sent to prison.
Well, ultimately, it would be up to the Justice Department to prosecute city officials, which isn't likely. And keep in mind, Katan, that Congress hasn't actually struck down a specific D.C. law in over 25 years.
We'll see if they make a move on this one. Well, 23 Dutch fans were arrested in Rome and 19 charged after violence broke out before the Dutch team's Europa League's football match with AS Roma. Drunk fans damaged buildings and threw bottles at riot police, and hundreds clashed with police at the Spanish Steps right before the game.
Police fired tear gas and fought with fans, leaving 13 officers reportedly injured. The square's recently restored fountain was left full of empty beer bottles and badly damaged, which prompted an outcry over the damage done to the city's monuments.
Well, the price of oil is beginning to rise steadily after falling below $50 a barrel. However, for some American oil companies, that may be a bit too little too late. Some American energy firms are making massive job cuts, releasing people by the thousands, including Schlumberger Oil, which cut 9,000 jobs, Baker Hughes cut 7,000 jobs, and the well-known Halliburton with 6,400 job cuts. Yeah.
Ed Hers, head of Hill House Resources in Austin, Texas, said the expectations now are that there will be 10,000 fewer wells drilled in the United States this year. No one can afford to keep workers on the payroll if there's no revenue coming in, and so the layoffs are a natural outcome of the low oil prices.
Global oil prices dropped to their lowest levels in years in 2014. In one way or another affecting the entire global economy and especially oil exporting nations. Experts suggest it's because Saudi Arabia has been challenging the growing U.S. shale oil market. Professor of political science Thomas Rodnam said, "I think Saudi Arabia has definitely had a hand in trying to undercut the fracking industry in America, and I believe it's pretty much had some success."
Now, some believe OPEC, the club of some of the biggest exporting nations, is responsible for the lower prices for refusing to cut production so that the price of oil would go back up. Now, the Saudi Arabian Minister of Petroleum and Mineral Resources said their economy could still function normally for up to 8 years, even if oil was at $20 a barrel. They could still function.
I read somewhere that they can function if it was even far lower than that. Yeah, it's amazing how much is being made. Well, Professor Rodnam continued, if Saudi Arabia did cut their oil production and oil prices rise even further, those jobs in the United States would most likely flow back to the tight oil production. If they can keep it at $60 a barrel, they can take offline the tight oil production in the United States.
Almost like eliminating the competition there.
That's right.
Well, our next report is on what scientists are calling one of the most addicting drugs ever. So addicting that 30,000 people every second are doing it. Now take a look at this video from fightthenewdrug.org.
I want to talk to you about this, our brain. It's something that we all have, performing at different capacities, I'm sure, but still, we all have one, and it was given to us for free just for being born, and it's the powerhouse of our bodies. Without it, of course, we just drop dead, because you can't function without it. So it's the most valuable thing that each of us possess. So it's pretty important that we protect it, right? And luckily, we have these things called skulls to help us out. Sometimes we challenge those skulls and do things that kind of hurt our brains, like this and this. I don't even know what he's thinking. And sometimes we just make stupid decisions with those brains, and you know, this guy, luckily this guy's wearing a helmet, so. But what are some other things that might hurt our brains? Obviously we've got alcohol, we've got drugs, and we've got, you know, big metal balls with spikes on the end of them. But I want to talk about a new drug. The thing is, pornography is not all that new. It's been around since the beginning. So why are we calling it a new drug? Well, that's because scientists are just now, over the last decade, beginning to understand what pornography really does, how it affects our brains, and psychologists are understanding how it affects our behaviors, and sociologists, our society. And so we're just beginning to understand that it can be just as addictive as drugs, as hard drugs. And we'll explain how, because I know that there's some skeptical eyes out there kind of thinking, wait a second, drugs? Really? I don't sniff it, I don't inhale it, I don't inject it. How is pornography like a drug? But first, you're probably wondering, dude, we're teenagers, why are you talking to us? Why are you talking to us about pornography? It's an uncomfortable topic, right? In fact, I bet you anything that as you guys came into this, as you kind of found out what this was going to be all about, you thought to yourself, oh boy, here we go. Shoot, you know, how do I get out of this? I mean, not a lot of people like to talk about it, but it's becoming more and more of an issue, and we got to deal with it. And here's why we're talking to you guys. The largest group of internet porn users is youth, ages 12 to 17, you guys. 90% of the people watching this video right now fit into that group. Do you know what the average age of exposure is for pornography? 11 years old. 11! And 9 out of 10 youth ages 8 to 16 have seen it. So we know what it is. We know what it is. We're not here to define it. Get this. Every second, now, 30,000 people are viewing online pornography. And what was the largest group of internet porn users? 12 to 17, so you see how a lot of those are there. And girls, watching this right now, listen up. A lot of you tune out for topics like this. You can think, okay, it's a guy's issue, it's not my issue. recent statistics show that 30% of addicts are women. That number has skyrocketed over the last decade and is growing. So current research is showing that pornography is a drug and that it can lead to addiction. But some of you are looking out there going like, well, how? It doesn't make any sense. How? Again, I don't sniff it, I don't smoke it. Well, how? Let me show you. Pornography goes in through the eyes, in through the iris, and triggers a release of chemicals in your brain. Chemicals like dopamine, serotonin, epinephrine, oxytocin. Now this is a science class, but you may have heard of some of those. Now these are natural chemicals that your body produces. These chemicals are needed. When you do drugs, hard drugs, or look at pornographic material, your brain is overloaded with these chemicals. After you keep looking at porn, your brain gets used to those high amounts and builds up a tolerance. Those same images that once gave you a rush don't have the same effect anymore. In order to get that same rush, it not only takes more of it, but it also takes a more hardcore version of it. Your brain becomes dependent on that rush of chemicals and literally rewires itself to think that that's normal, and so you cannot function without it. That is addiction. The same process happens with cocaine and heroin. They can't stop.
Well, that does create some confusion in the mind. Well, from police shootings to a teacher's suicide, YPN's Larry McGee has the story today. Larry, where has this latest police incident taken place this time?
The shooting took place in the nation's second largest city this week and was captured on phone and posted to social media by one of several bystanders who witnessed the ordeal. The video has reportedly been viewed over 1 million times, showing the Los Angeles Police Department wrestling with an unarmed man before one officer pulls his weapon and fires 5 shots into the homeless victim. The police were reportedly attempting to respond to a robbery call in San Pedro, and when they arrived, they found a 45-year-old suspect whom they say was belligerent and unwilling to comply with police commands, so that police ultimately made the decision to escalate to deadly force. Police body cams reportedly show the victim making grabs for the officer's weapons. Still, community leaders aren't buying and are planning to stage more rallies for this coming week. At least 2 other communities were also shaken up this week, starting down south in Killeen, Texas, where a gunman took the lives of 3 victims and seriously injured that of another before turning the gun on himself and taking his own life. Authorities say the tragedy took place in 2 homes, with the gunman killing 2 people and severely wounding another in one residence, and then forcing his wife back to their home where he shot her and then himself. There has been no report to date concerning any possible cause for the conflict, but yet more mourning in a second community where the driver of a van has a medical emergency while steering and loses control of his vehicle, blasting through the kitchen wall of an unsuspecting resident and killing him. In another incident, which some might say is unrelated, but others would identify as a cause, A&E's Phil Robertson is back in the headlines this week after delivering a fiery speech concerning the rising STD rate in the United States. 110 million Americans now have a sexually transmitted illness, Roberts announced, and went on to say that he didn't want to see America sick. I don't want you to come down with a debilitating illness. I don't want you to die early, he continued. You're disease-free, and she is disease-free. You marry. You keep your sex right there. You won't get sick from a sexually transmitted disease, he urged to a receptive and applauding crowd of the American Conservative Union. Recent reports are now linking the infections from such diseases to conditions such as depression. And this week, the children of El Dorado High School in California received a heartbreaking example of the suicide that depression often leads to, when they entered their classroom early morning and found their teacher hanging from the ceiling. Authorities report that the children were unable initially to enter the classroom and had to obtain the assistance of a teacher nearby, who unlocked the door And that is when everyone made the gruesome find. The school was closed for the day, and parents, of course, were notified of the tragedy involving the teacher who had just a short time earlier counseled children concerning the dangers of suicide and encouraged them to seek help if they ever needed it. No suicide note was left behind by the wife and instructor that other teachers describe as awesome, whose tragic decision provides a saddening example of the uncertainty of the times, where life can seem absolutely great in one moment and be an absolute disaster in the next. For IPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
Well, those were some interesting comments from Phil Robertson. At least there's someone else standing up for some morals.
Well, it's great to see that type of behavior. The EU is threatening to pile up more pressure on Russia, including excluding it from the SWIFT banking system. Many are asking just what is the game plan for Russia, and is the ceasefire in Ukraine holding, or is it just a pretense for NATO doing whatever it wants without question?
EU Foreign Policy Chief Federica Mogherini says the current anti-Russian sanctions will remain in place until Minsk's ceasefire agreement is fully implemented. She also added the EU is ready to set up the sanctions and that all the members are united, saying that unity is our strength. The EU, along with the U.S., have slapped several sanctions on Russia, accusing Moscow of providing weapons to pro-Russian forces fighting against Kiev.
Russia has denied all allegations, accusing the West of providing support to rebels and creating instability in the region. U.S. and British defense secretaries have said that they both plan to send non-lethal military equipment to Kiev. Some believe that the U.S. is trying to sabotage the ceasefire agreement in Ukraine, and according to the UN, since this conflict has began, more than 6,000 people have lost their lives.
Wow. A ceasefire agreement was initially signed in September, but was not implemented, and a new one was inked on February 12th. Now, the West is insisting on the full implementation of the agreement, and Russia is saying that it will retaliate if more sanctions are imposed against it. Now, this dispute in Ukraine is seen as a tug-of-war between Russia and the West for more influence in the region.
Russian President Vladimir Putin is again criticizing sanctions against his country over the Ukraine crisis, saying that sanctions are aimed at curbing Russia's development, but that they will not obtain their goal, he said. He also added that Russia will not allow one country to be the world's undisputed leader, in reference, of course, to the United States. He said Moscow will reject such a world order. Yes.
Well, U.S. Ambassador to South Korea, Mark Lipper, suffered a knife attack while visiting South Korea. Now, Kim Ki-jun, a Korean nationalist, was the assailant. The suspect screamed about reuniting North and South Korea and demanded the halting of U.S. and South Korean military exercises. Now, police say he used a 10-inch blade to slice the ambassador's arm and slash a 4-inch gash, opening the side of the ambassador's face.
That was a bad wound, too. That didn't look very, very nice. Lipper underwent surgery and received 80 stitches, but he tweeted that he was doing well and in great spirits. Now, the question remains as to why there was no U.S. security and only one unarmed Korean guard to protect the ambassador. Bruce Tully, a former diplomatic security agent, said it's a mystery as to why he didn't have the proper amount of security.
And Katan, you'd think as an ambassador you would have security with you at all times.
Had that been the case, this might not have taken place.
Well, NATO, an organization designed to counter global threats, is encountering new threats from both east and the south of its borders, Ukraine and ISIS. Now, the ISIS threat has already moved into NATO countries. Both of these threats have been around a long time and are called hybrid warfare.
Interesting. Alexander Vershbo said this is a combination of the threat of conventional force combined with covert intervention, support for separatists, disinformation, cyber attacks, sowing confusion and ambiguity so that the adversary isn't sure what is really happening, or as to put it by another analyst, you don't have to be truthful to get your message out. Yeah, so people don't really know what's going on while this war takes place.
Well, Bruce Gannon of the Global Network Against Weapons and Nuclear Power in Space said in an interview with RT that many in the U.S. government are calling for 10,000 troops for a war in Syria. Now, this indicates that Americans' role in the world is as a security expert. America isn't making anything anymore because it's cheaper for corporate America to find things outside of the country.
This term, security expert, means that we will go and fight the wars on behalf of corporate capitalism as they try to take control of the planet, that we being the United States. The U.S. and NATO are taking down any country that is in the way of that goal, including Syria, Iran, and the destabilization of Ukraine, and they intend to take down Russia and China in much the same way.
Well, the question, he said, American people have to ask themselves is, what is the number one American export today? And the answer, weapons. And the second question is, if weapons is your number one export product, what is your global marketing strategy? The answer is endless war.
Oh, interesting.
Now, this is a big moral dilemma in this country, and we're really not talking about it, talking about this at a time when we really should be.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, from droughts to violence to continual war, it seems like the world right now just has no answers for the confusion and the misery that it's brought upon itself. There's only one person right now on the face of the earth that has the authority and the courage to stand up for what's right, and he's teaching it every day. And that man is Yisrayl Hawkins.
Well, contact the House of Yahweh today and request that they send you a copy of their free Prophetic Word magazine and monthly newsletter. Now, to contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at The House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. Visit them on any of their websites, www.yahweh.com, www.yisraelhawkins.com, or www.yahwehsbranch.com. Now, you can also email them at info@yahweh.com, and for any calls that are outside the United States, please call the number that's on your screen now.
Now, don't go anywhere. Up next, the man who is authorized to bring you that life-giving oil, the Word of Yahweh. Stay tuned for Yisrayl Hawkins. For all of us here at YPN News, I'm Katan Alexander.
And I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
Thank you for joining us.
If everyone would please stand. At this time, I'd like to introduce the greatest teacher in the world, the great Kahan Yisrayl, Abel Hawkins.
Shalom, everyone. Wow. Everybody's back. Praise Yahweh. Praise. Wonderful. You may be seated. I've missed you too. I had this sermon for several weeks on global warming, but didn't quite see the right time to bring it for the last few months. I decided to put it on background. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. If you saw the news, you see how dangerous it's getting. I'd say rejoice that you've been called out of this world. That's just one of the reasons I want to speak on rejoicing. You know, you're called to the house of Yahweh to learn to rejoice. That's one of the things. You know, it seems so ironic that you'd have to be taught to rejoice. One of the apostles said, "We rejoice in tribulation." And they went through some pretty bad stuff. The apostle Kepha, he was hung upside down on a stake till he died. We're reaching the world, as you can see that from the news, different things are taking place. And of course, Yahweh said that we would. That's quite a miracle right there that Yahweh promised. He prophesied that he would call certain ones to his house, and from his house, the word of Yahweh would go out to all the world. Now, he said that before there was a television or power to broadcast through the air by radio or anything else. I remember when Jacob and I got on a radio station, years ago. I can't remember when, but it's called XCG. I don't know if you heard of that, but it was a pretty wide-reaching radio station. And we were talking then about, this was only reaching a small portion of the people, and things that would have to change, and more radio stations would have to be invented like this one, and we'd get on all of them. But that wasn't it, of course. And now from one single location. Now think of it, all you people is having trouble believing. Think of it. That's a prophecy you can't deny. Unless you're a fool, as Yahshua said, you can't deny it. And that from one location, this message would go out to all nations. Even the one that didn't exist at that time. And that was the one he said he's going to go out from. The one that didn't exist as a Babylonian nation. Wasn't discovered until 1492, they said. That's what they said. That's in history. Well, right now, Yisrayl Hawkins tells scientists exactly what makes life function properly in new publication. This one is really it's going big time. There's one, they just sent me a few of the stations, the large ones that's carrying this. World now, and it's reaching 6,701.019. That's 6 million. Yeah, another one here, Fox, reaching 3,341,178. W Bay, I guess that's West Bay, view release is going to 1,000,021.788. And these are on internet too. They're all posted on the internet. Another one here, WFM.com. That's going to 1,697,362. Now these are not even the high points yet. Let me see if I can find the current. We're going out on television too in the Times Square. They're putting us, Yahweh is putting us everywhere. This is Yahshua, by the way, doing this. He's high priest, and he shows in no uncertain terms that he's making these moves, as you saw from the great speeches that was given by the great Kohan Heimerman Hawkins and the great Gohan Benjamin Krause Hawkins. That was the latest one today. The one last week, there is only one place shown in Scripture to to achieve salvation and shows proof in newsletter. You probably wouldn't think that would reach very many, but right now the audience is at 211 million. 211,267,900, and they got about 4 TV stations here running it on television and internet, and each one of these, 2 of them is going over 1 million, and the others are going like 900,000 viewers there. So there's no doubt we're reaching out in this to all the world. And this is global. It's also global. And we do that, of course, from the increase in knowledge that didn't exist either at that time, and only came into being in my lifetime. That's another miracle for those who don't believe. If you just try to prove that otherwise, it was predicted in every single detail, unless you're too much of a fool to figure what is written and what came true. There's no way you could disbelieve this proof that Yahweh is putting out here. The scientist, I don't remember when I first started bringing to the people, I know it was Rodale, that brought it out in Prevention magazine. Well, one of his preventions, of course, was a bunch of poppycock. When he was saying, get off of salt and get on this new stuff I've got here for just a few bucks more per ounce. And they started using it in the health food stores, and my brother Jacob decided he was going to do that, and I tried to talk him out of it, but I think he was still doing it years later. But he actually thought this and thought it was harmful to the health. Now I know that the doctors have taken many of you off of salt, which has hurt you. I guarantee you it hurts your body. Well, now science knows that it hurts your body. Yeah. Now, we were telling it at least 50 years ago, in the place on T&P Lane that used to be the sanctuary for the House of Yahweh. Now it's a printing presses that run, we'd like for them to run 24 hours, but I think they have to shut down an hour or two to grease the machinery. But we still can't keep up now. We're getting to where we can't keep up with our present facilities, and so we're having to make other moves now to keep up. It hurts me when we can't supply the books of Yahweh, just instantly. We're going to supply them. We were telling everyone that we're going to get them out there to you. Just hang with us. And but we're getting a lot of demands on the book of Yahweh now since I mentioned it. Yes. Well, this salt now. Does high salt diet combat infections? And of course they prove it does. Immune boosting effects. Salt in the skin helps mice fight off bacteria, and that humans may also stockpile salt at infection sites. That's what your body does to fight infections. Now, if it doesn't have the salt, if they can get you on something that's made from well, they guarantee it to be organic, and then they guarantee the poison they put on it to be organic. The DDT, it's all organic, I'm sure. They've poisoned the land up so much that when it floods and covers their fields with river mud, they're not allowed to push that river mud back into the to the stream that it came from because it's laced with poison from the ground where the water washed it in the river. You talk about confusion, a mixed up mess that we have in the farming industry, and they're wanting to grind up some of that and put it on your table and tell us it's better than salt. Well, I'm glad that Yahweh buried our salt mines deep in the ground. So we would have a great supply of salt. This is so fabulous, this article right here. Only recently learned science. Science, now get this. You got to get this because we've been publishing this and preaching it for over 50 years, I know. Scientists only recently learned that the connection tissue of skin can serve as a reservoir for sodium ions when we consume large amounts of salt. He noticed that even mice on low-salt diets had unusually high salt concentrations in wounded skin. Now, how would that know? Can the salt think? And when you get a wound, the salt in your body starts rushing to that place? How would you explain such a thing? I praise Yahweh, blessed is he that has studied microbiology in the house of Yahweh. Very blessed. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad that you didn't get off of salt. You'd probably died before these words were spoken today. Well, they do. The salt, your body rushes it to the place. You're so wonderfully made, brother. And if you could just think of what's going on in your brains and in your hearts, and how your body reacts to a wound or an infection. And of course, what do the doctors do? They give you an antibiotic, and when the infection becomes stronger than the antibiotic, they hunt for another antibiotic that's stronger, that'll do yet more harm to your body. Well, now they're changing their tune. They're even going to honey now. Wonder why they'd be doing that. Because somebody told them it's in the scriptures and that's your best bet right there? Yes. The pen is a mighty thing. It's mightier than the sword. It's mightier than the nuclear bombs. Zitz, the scientist, and his colleagues realized that immune cells arriving in wounded skin to fight infections were entering a salty microenvironment. You know, the body takes care of itself. And of course, when it's healthy, a healthy body does. But it can't be healthy unless you eat salt. Have salt within yourselves. And what else did he say with that? Remember? Rejoice. Have salt within yourselves and rejoice. I can now say that I haven't for 1 month answered the phone and someone asked me, "How are you?" And I didn't say, "I'm rejoicing. How about you?" And they say, "Oh, yes, I am now." Yes, I'm learning to rejoice in tribulation in whatever comes my way. As the Apostle Shaul also said. They realized that the body was shuffling salt to infected skin to protect against invaders. In other words, we are salting ourselves in order to protect ourselves. Jonathan Gentrix, a microbiologist at the University of Regensburg in Germany, and first author on the study which appears in the current issue of Cell Metabolism. We need to get that book, you young priests. You need to get it and add to your collection on the microbiology lessons. This one is the same thing, but sodium fights infections, health drawbacks, exaggerated. That's the ones that forbid salt. They exaggerated, saying it was poison. The government has taken it off of its list of unwanted now. They're changing their minds too after new studies came out. This is really great right here. Another thing, House bill may allow raw milk retail sales. I've told you about raw milk and how it protects itself. Yahweh made it to where it would protect itself. Sweet milk. I'm an Okie, but I knew what sweet milk was long before you did. Sweet milk is fresh from the cow's udder. And I used to milk the cow like this. When I was a child, sometimes my cat would come along and I'd squirt some at him, and he liked it too. I milked cows by hand. We had 32 head of cattle, and myself and Jacob and Vernon and my dad, the four of us, we milked those cows twice a day. And of course, from the cream, we sold the cream, and that brought the groceries in until, of course, they were all repossessed. While buying raw milk products from farms is legal, it's currently illegal to sell it in the chain supermarkets. But they're changing that now. They got word from somebody that the Pope was talking about that said they know it all. And I wouldn't lie about it. I know that we did. That's great. Let's see. Well, there's several things on this raw milk now, because it just came before Congress, and the people are fighting for it. Some of our representatives here in Texas are fighting for it. It was on the news this week. What's behind the government hatred of raw milk? Well, of course, the government hatred was the representatives that took the false reports. And that's what you'll find in that article. They took false reports. They exaggerated the reports. And of course, now they're having to backtrack, because we started telling people that raw milk was healthy. And of course, you go from the sweet milk will turn sour. It's even healthy when it's sour. I drank sour milk constantly when I was a child. It goes from that to clabber milk. I drank the clabber milk when I was a child. And then, of course, from the buttermilk, where you churn the milk after it clabbers, and you got buttermilk, got bits of butter in your milk. And it's very healthy for you. Everything there is healthy. Mix some honey with it, and you got just about a complete meal to last the day. But now, Washington thirsty for raw milk, despite warnings. Look at that. Washington thirsty for raw milk despite warnings. And all because of the house of Yahweh. The great wisdom of Yahweh they rejected. Search out and read the book of Yahweh, Yahweh said. Not one of these will fail you. Not one. A House bill may allow raw milk to retail sales again. Well, CIA. Now, rejecting this, of course, has brought wars. Yahweh said we'll have wars and rumors of wars, and hatred will grow because of transgressions, because the laws were pushed aside. The great wisdom of Yahweh was pushed aside. So Yahweh said, you're going to have hatred and wars, just like Cain did. Well, you saw what was taking place there. We have a CIA insider break silence on global currency wars, but he also talks about nuclear wars. In a startling interview, he reveals that all 16 U.S. intelligence agencies have begun to prepare for World War III. All 16. Making matters worse, his colleagues believe it could begin within the next 6 months. Yeah, praise Yahweh. Yeah. Rejoice that you're in the protected place. Now, talk about going from stupidity to Follywood. I think that's the way you pronounce that, isn't it? Follywood? Well, I'm an Okie, so, bear with me a little. But this is the rabbis now that rejected Yahweh's wisdom. After attacks, European rabbis trained self-defense in Prague. Well, you know what they're going to defend themselves with? Karate. Knives. They haven't seen your commercials. We need to make more of those commercials like that. Shorter, but more of them. And I guess you could show the man with the knife getting shot by the police officer who they hired to protect him, in one of them. But I can think of several that you could make to start pushing this. But this is what comes when you deplete your body of salt. Have salt within yourselves, and you will rejoice. What did Yahweh say to Cain? He said, why are you so angry, Cain? Why are you so angry? Who is he saying that to today? Francis, why are you so angry? Why are all 16 of our representatives so angry that they're going for nuclear war now? Why are you building these big ships that can wipe out nations and kingdoms? Kingdom against kingdom, nation against nation. It's all in the fellowship of Cain. All the world has gone the way of Cain, Yahweh said. Cain, Jacob, that's Jacob chapter 1 and verse 11, I believe. Well, here we have now the brotherhood, the same brotherhood, spoke with the same pope, and they're preparing for war. And their leader is saying, now is the time to start preparing for war. Well, of course, they started years ago, but now they're building up. They've got their nuclear weapons built up and ready to deliver. In the same crazy, confused world, we have the Center for Disease Control investigating deadly bacteria linked to doctors' offices. Not just the hospitals anymore, but you go to the doctor's office. You can get it there too. The bacteria C. difficile, typically found in hospitals, are now in doctors and dentist offices. Doctors and dentists. If you have to go to one of them places, you better spray yourself down with some protection and take a heavy dose of salt before you go. Maybe you could throw it over your shoulders too. You remember that? Now here's the great one. Because honey is in the scriptures, and I remember bringing this out back in 82 or 83, that honey, you are commended. It's actually a law of Yahweh. Don't think that the 10 Commandments is the only law. If Yahweh says it, it's law, and you should put it in your book as law and practice it. But he says honey is healthy. That's what the Savior said. But that's what the Scripture shows. And says, honey and butter. And here we have to get an endorsement now before we can even sell it. Raw honey or raw milk, you got to get an endorsement before you can get it into the grocery store. The raw honey you don't, but the milk you do. This raw honey, study reveals honey the answer to resistant superbugs. Yes. Imagine that. It says antibiotic drug use had spawned a whole host of devastating side effects, including the rise of unstoppable superbugs. I don't know if you got that or not, but when you take antibiotics, it don't stay like they put it in your body. It mixes in with the other bugs that's in there, crossbreeds, mutates, and so forth, and you got an unstoppable enemy here. It's a defense that multiplies when you put this kind of stuff, which came from bacteria to begin with. It came from feces. They get some of it from feces. That's the main one now they're using to fight this other, because it's their body's defense of trying to get rid of it. And of course, you can drink it now in Abelin just from the tap water, I guess. They're flushing it into the lakes. Not just Abelin. You saw the drought. I believe it's NASA that put out the article saying we can expect mega droughts now. It's not going to change, and it's going to go on for decades, they're saying. The rains that we got would not help anything in the drought situation. It floods, it washes the fields away, washes houses down the mountains, big fancy houses in Follywood. They built their house on the side of a slope where the rain comes down. Oh, man. They don't just teach it in schools, they practice it. They practice Follywood in their, and the rain comes, you know. Well, down comes the mountain, down comes the house, lands in the highway, cars run into it, slide off the road trying to miss it and go down the slope and kill themselves. You know, it's going on all over. The stupidity is going on everywhere. Well, now listen to this again. Antibiotic drug use has spawned. It's the result of it. It's a result of what we're facing now in deadly, untreatable bugs. Is what the man is trying to tell you. Antibiotic drug use has spawned. It's bred. It's mutated. This is what I told them 50 years ago. Has spawned a host of devastating side effects, including the rise of unstoppable superbugs and even an increased incidence of cancer. What's causing your cancers? Well, you already got the worm in your body if you're eating pork. If you're following the priest who eats pork, you'll be consumed with him. That's what Yahweh says. Instead of coming to the house of Yahweh and rejoicing, we want to go off and eat pork and die of cancer. You got the cancer parasite in your body. You add to that the other parasites your body got rid of the last time you went to the bathroom. You take that back and you shoot it in your arm. They shoot you with this stuff. Yes, this is what they do. I'm telling you honestly, this is what they do. That stuff goes back in your blood, abominable things in their vessels, and it mutates and it helps the enemy increase a defense in your body, inside your bodies. Then you flush it into the lake water and you let the others get a dose of what you just got rid of. And Yahweh said they would be drinking their own stuff. Yes, that was a prophecy also. Even an increased incidence of cancer. That's what it's causing. And they know it's causing this. The answer of the medical establishment has been to create harsher antibiotics, which in turn have led to the creation of even more superbugs. Clearly, it's time for a different way to deal with troublesome microbes. Troublesome microbes. That's what the studies from the House of Yahweh puts out, is studies of microorganisms of which your whole body is made. Now, science is now figuring that out after we told them what to look for. They now know this, and they know that your body is made up of kingdoms. Why did they know it? They didn't find it out for 6,000 years. They shunned it. They pushed it aside. They took the book of Yahweh to Rome and hid it from you. This great wisdom that would keep you well forever. and they hid it in vaults. Wouldn't let anyone have it. For 1,500 years they did this. And the whole world is following after this beastly system that says eat pork. The start of the whole thing. That's the apple off of the tree of evil. That's one of the sins. Troublesome microbes, and research is showing that honey fits the bill. Finally, it took them 50 years to get my article into the science labs and find out that, hey, this guy's right. He does know everything. And the Pope backed him up and said, yeah, that's what he said. Well, we're dealing with a being that's sitting by the side of Yahweh at Yahweh's right hand. Yahweh is holding a man with a stone by his right hand, which makes him over on his left hand. You got all that figured out? A stone, a white stone. They did a great job on that, didn't they? White stone. Well, there's the pork bug that's in your body if you're following the priest. This is his mouth, by the way, and his horns that he latches on to you with. I think I counted 10, by the way. 10 horns. Well, some of you caught that, I don't know. Now, here's the wonderful thing that Yahweh is doing. In dozens of scriptures, I could just take them and put them in your mind right quickly before I read you the article, but that'll take some time. But astronomers find a dusty galaxy that shouldn't exist. Well, this is revealing the lies that was told about, of course, evolution, things like this. Astronomers have spotted a surprisingly dusty little galaxy within the cluster Abel, A-B-E-L-L, within the cluster of Abel, shown here in an image by the Hubble telescope. This shouldn't have been there. It wasn't there the day before. And this is a galaxy now. You can't make it out exactly, but this is a whole galaxy full of places for the house of Yahweh to make use of. Actually filled with it. This is a wonderful article, and of course he says, let's see, the problem the scientists report Monday in Nature is that while the tiny galaxy dates from just about 7 million years, now this is what they've come up with so far, which is a lie. It has not, and it's newly discovered. But they're saying, well, it's probably existed for 7 million years, 700 million years, but it has not. It wasn't there yesterday, so it was created by Yahweh in one day, 24-hour period. And they say 700 million years or so, give or take a few 100 million years and one day, or so after the Big Bang. After the Big Bang. Well, of course, this shows, too, what a lie the Big Bang was, and exposes it. It's far more dusty than something the young and small has any right to be. Last week, says the scientist, we learned of an incredibly massive black hole in the early universe. Now we have this average galaxy with significant amounts of dust. We've had this curtain picture of the early universe, but it's clear that we really don't know what's going on. Well, we could tell them, but the Pope would come back with some wise remark saying, we know it all. I say, yeah, we do. Sure do. The risk of American major droughts for decades, the NASA says, and we're seeing this already, and of course we know for sure the cause, but we're the only ones that know the cause. Now we're telling it as fast as we can. I want you to go over to Exodus 20:20. That's an easy one to remember, isn't it? 20:20. Exodus 20:20. Now, Moshe received the great wisdom of Yahweh in friendship, and gave it to the people in the first verses of Exodus 20. And this 10 laws right here, you couldn't find more perfect laws to have friendship. Even in Follywood, you could have friendship in Follywood if they would just follow these 10 commandments. He gives us more in detail laws to back these up, and shows how a nation could be, free of fighting and wars and sickness and disease. He gives us detailed messages to show what this 10 commandments that you could actually remember. You could memorize these commandments, and of course the Catholic Church changed this, and this is what they didn't want you to see. The Pope didn't want you, the Catholic Church, the Pharisees, Sadducees, Essenes, and Herodians that moved to Rome, destroyed the temple, sent their Roman army to destroy the temple. They brought the book of Yahweh to Rome and hid it for 1,500 years. And of course Yahweh said, in the last days, my house is going to preach this, so Yahweh had plans for it to reappear. In this time period, this generation only, and of course it's here, and we're reading from it. That's quite a miracle. But this is what Yahweh gave to Moshe, gave it to Adam to begin with. His son preached it. Abel, what this galaxy is named after. Well, at Abel goes forth the message today, as Yahweh said it would, to all the world from one location. As the great David Yehuda Hawkins brought out, searching back to get the original writing of Matthew 24, verse 14. Well, you see these 10 commandments. This is the wisdom, the great wisdom of Yahweh that he gave to Moshe and said, you take this and live by it, and you will have peace. You can bring peace among you if you'll live by it. But then he said, after he gave them this, and they said, oh yeah, what you said we'll do. Well, it's easy said, right? They didn't work in a hot kitchen where they had sweat running down. They didn't work out in a goat barn, surely, or out in a milk lot. Well, I'm afraid they did. In fact, the first school that is mentioned as being a sizable school where everyone was living taking care of themselves, and raising their own food, drinking raw milk because they didn't have that expensive machine that they want to sell them, that they call to pasteurize it. The pasture is on the 7 hills of Rome, by the way, so they pasteurized it, see? It comes from the pastor that eats pork and teaches the people to eat pork. Well, that's what you're getting when you go to the grocery store and get some of this pasteurized milk. That's pastor authorized, like the authorized version, the modified version. Well, he pasteurized that too. Well, here in verse 20 now of this same chapter, he says, "No, I'm not going to take your word for it. I'm going to put you in a hot kitchen." Wow, do I have to go through that? Well, he put Daniel in a fiery furnace. That might have been what he was talking about, you think? Cooking food and unrefrigerated with no air conditioners. Well, then he sent him an air conditioner, and whoa, man, this is worse than being hot. We're cold, we can't get warm. Well, these are trials, I know. And then he tells you after this, he told Daniel, when he threw him in there, he said, "Rejoice." And Daniel set you a perfect example and come walking out of that hell fire. Yes. And now Yahweh said, we're going to resurrect Daniel. We are. Those who overcome. Well, what do you mean overcome? Overcome is being rejoicing. Rejoicing. That shows you have overcome. That's one of the steps that shows you have overcome. Rejoicing. You've come to that gold. I don't see it here, but you've come to that gold that we were talking about. The harvest time that we sing about. Have y'all learned that song yet? One has. That's our great music teacher. Well, we got it coming for you, but the harvest time is right at hand, and we're going to be singing about it this feast now. Harvest time. Well, what makes that grain of gold wheat that we're all looking for to see that we want in our house? That we want in our house, that Yahweh wants in His house. What makes that grain of gold, wheat, gold? Where it can actually get a purple position in the house, in Yahweh's house. Isn't that something? Well, we got the wheat coming, and the workers, of course, that talks about, hey, it's full of tares. Should we go ahead and pull them out? And Yeshua said, no, let them grow together. Let them grow together, and in the last days, there's going to be one huge separation take place. Now, in chapter 7 of Revelations, we're shown that there's a lot of people going to take these laws, these 10 commandments here, plus the other detailed laws that back these up and say, here is the technical part. I want you, it's colored purple, and I want you to become this purple to get this magnificent job in my kingdom. He won't take your word for it, because a lot of people give their word, and then they get to the door of this fiery furnace, and they run, and they start like the wolf going to grandma's place. Well, Yahweh says in verse 20, Moshe said to the people, don't fear, don't get afraid now, for Yahweh has come to test you, to prove you, to see if you really honestly will, under all kinds of conditions, stand strong and become that gold grain of wheat that it actually classifies for the purple position in Yahweh's house. Well, that's quite a parable put together from several different scriptures. But verse 23 shows what most people seek for, where Yahshua says, seek first the kingdom. Well, this is the kingdom right here. These are the laws that govern the kingdom. If you think of what has taken place from Adam and Cain, Adam, Abel, and Cain, and you think of the kingdoms that have been built, now all that followed the way of Cain, which was eating the pork, confusing the mind, building the hatred. You saw the article about the science now proving that people who eat pork, they have an aggressive attitude. And it takes you a while to get that aggressive attitude, even hitting with the fist. Well, nobody who hits with the fist will get into Yahweh's kingdom. But the aggressive attitude, it takes some fighting to get that controlled. It takes some real determination. And that's what Yahweh wants to see you in the turning to the gold. He wants to see this aggressive behavior of, aggressive actions to get rid of the aggressive behavior towards others. And of course, he has to put you to test to prove you, and he's going to prove you. But that's the reason you were brought here early. Otherwise, he would have picked you up, waited till the bombs dropped, and then he'd have picked you up and took you to the protected place and start working with you. But no, he brought you early so you could train for this position. If you were in the kingdom and you had the power to move mountains, I know you remember some of these things. Yahshua, as an example, he came to a fig tree and he was hungry and he wanted to get him some figs and no figs. Here's a fig tree that wouldn't bear any fruit. And he said instantly to that tree, you will never bear fruit again. And instantly the disciples said that tree was gone. It started dying. It died. It wilted right in front of them. Now, if you had that power and someone stepped on your toes, someone that you didn't like to begin with because you was a little bit jealous of them or something, I'm talking to adults as well as children, you can't fight. No fighting. Praise Yahweh. That's what the rabbis are doing. The rabbis that they call rabbis is some leftovers that didn't go to Rome because they didn't want to give up the Sabbath, and they couldn't mix in with the Pharisees, Sadducees, Essenes, and Herodians. Well, that's the leftovers that's in Israel. And to defend themselves, they're getting sticks and knives. Really makes a lot of sense, don't it? Well, of course, the rest of the crew that went to the big organizations, the four great ruling powers that Daniel spoke of. Now, this, of course, is the governments evolved and the kings that ruled over them that Samuel warned that warned the heads of Israel and the heads of Jacob. You heads of Jacob who pastor my people and lead them astray. Well, they became strong with their armies. They saw strength. They built a big army, and one that they could send out and captivate the people, bring them to Babylon and Rome. And they built from the 12 tribes came these four great kingdoms. They split later and formed what we call the quartet today, but they're still practicing the same forceful attitude towards, we got to force these people to follow our rules. And then but they can't agree on what rules is best. There's no agreement, no unity there to hold them together. And this is what you see in this whole mixed up world right now. First off, their minds are confused because they do eat pork. They follow the priests who eat pork, and they eat pork. And the people who say, oh no, we don't eat pork, they know nothing about what's in the food they do eat. And the restaurants, as they said, that the Jewish rabbis, as they call themselves in New York, where there's actually getting STDs from the food they ate and being brought into them by their servants. Well, they're still eating pork, whether they realize it or not. The only place that I know of where you don't eat pork is right here where we're sitting right now. If you know anything or have learned anything from this sermon, what you saw on the news here about the wars and fighting and the sickness that's going around and how the doctors are making people sick by giving them shots that spawn other diseases. These articles are facts. It's what's going on in today's world. Giving you shots that will actually breed and mutate more harmful bugs inside of your body to where the next shot won't even count at all. And here you're hurting inside, you're dying, you will die. Well, all of this has come down to our time where the scientists are so smart now that they finally realized that salt is a defense. Why didn't they find that out years ago? Why didn't they find out that honey? We knew it. We knew it 50 years ago because we had the wisdom of Yahweh. We accepted it. We brought the wisdom back from Yahweh that had been hidden by the Catholic Church, who eats pork and teaches eating pork. Well, this wisdom right here that he gave Moshe, verse 23, he says, do not make yourselves gods from silver and gold. To understand what that's talking about, it's the deceitfulness of riches that Yeshua was talking about. It wasn't talking about making a gold idol or a gold image of some person who died. It's like a picture or something like this of a person who died and kneeling down. Even the idiots who eat pork don't realize that. They realize better than that this is not talking about that. It's making yourself into the image of a god. Like the ones who coax the deceitfulness of riches, or the god of war. The news came out about this god of war, Mars, of course. And of course, this was great. If you got those numbers, you could see, and there's greater things than that these men are going to show, more fantastic things that represent those numbers on that stone that I was given. That was in my right hand. Yahweh said, I will take you by your right hand. Yeshua sits at his right hand. I would have to be on his left side for him to take me by my right hand and give me that stone. And he said, don't fear, I'm going to take you through all of this. Praise Yahweh. And he said, when you pass through the fire, meaning we're going to pass through the fire, through that cafeteria that don't have any air conditioning, or the sanctuary that don't have enough heat, I'm going to try you. He says, I'm going to test you. Don't turn back to these gods after the deceitfulness of riches, looking for comfort zones that you can spend your time pushing buttons to get entertainment, filthy entertainment that actually ruins the mind. The filthy entertainment that they have, even on the telephones now. Now, this is what we're fighting against, brethren. And Yahweh is going to turn this whole wicked mess around. Now, he says there's going to be a kingdom that will be in total unity. Clyde is a very small town, and they got their hands so full of troubles right now that they can't even take care of the calls that come in. And we're learning firsthand about that. Abelin is a larger town. It's got more troubles than Clyde. They too have a larger police department, larger sheriff's department, but they can't take care of the problems that's in Abelin. No city can. You saw where the man shot the Muslim yesterday, him and his wife, I believe it was in Dallas. The Muslim and his wife was taking pictures of some ice things on the snow on the ground to show it, I guess, to their people somewhere. And someone shot him. Don't know why. You know, well, without unity in a kingdom, it's impossible. Without unity in the house, you're going to have trouble, and we do. We still have trouble because some have not yet come to perfection. If you come to perfection, like Yahweh says in the kingdom, and He's given you time to grow, He's given everybody time to grow. He called you here in plenty of time. And He said, just rejoice. Start rejoicing in what you're doing. In all that you have set your hand to do is what the Scripture, the way it was translated, but it means all that you're assigned to do by the priest who does not eat pork. Yes. Well, of course, their minds are ruined. All of them out there. The food is contaminated. And now they got an article out that said if you're particular about what you eat, you got a mental attitude. And you're listed on the mental list. So if you don't want to eat this pork that the priest who pasteurized it sent out to you, then you got a mental attitude. So you're liable to kill yourself or something, or kill someone else. They turn this around because it's the ones who get their minds poisoned, and they can't even have a mind of reality for themselves. Their mind is so confused they can think one thing and do something else. It's like dementia or Alzheimer's disease. It's much like that. When you reach for something out here, but your hand goes that way. Well, that's the way the minds are doing right now with this sickness and disease, who had the wisdom of Yahweh removed from them for 1,500 years. So we come down to a time period when all the world is sicker, sin is at its peak, and Yahweh is saying to this tiny house right here, He says, you're going to build and resurrect those before you. You're going to build a kingdom here of unity, and those who grow and overcome. And Yeshua said this, and Yeshua was running the show. He said, to those who overcome, I will grant to sit with me in my kingdom. Those who overcome. Well, how does He say to overcome? Rejoice. Rejoice in Yahweh's laws. I've given you several things here today to rejoice about, right? The kingdom of Yahweh is right at hand now, very close. You need to put forth a special effort and start cramming for these exams. Don't let the spirit of deceitfulness of riches crowd out this great knowledge that we have fought to get. You know who brought this knowledge back? This great knowledge that we got here, the book of Yahweh, that everyone was commanded to search out, that none of these are going to fail. He's going to build a kingdom. And you're part of it, or you wouldn't be here in this house right now. But first off, start rejoicing. Yes. In the fiery furnace, or wherever you're planted, whatever is assigned to you to do, rejoice in it. And if you got something that you simply can't handle, then get with your counselors and work it out to where you can handle it. You may have to build something to keep the smoke out. but you can build something to keep the smoke out and the heat out, right? I mean, that's what knowledge is given to you for, to use it. Use your head to do your job. Then you can rejoice in what you're doing, but work out your problems. If you can't work them out, get with a priest. They don't eat pork here in the house, so they got knowledge to work out your problems. But you will have problems. You're going to have trials. Praise Yahweh for it, right? That's my test, and I'm going to prove I can overcome it, right? 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 May Yahweh bless you, and I'll turn the services back to the next leader. I love you.